Welcome to the Broker Growth Accelerator, where we discuss how real estate brokers can accelerate their growth by improving their agent recruiting and retention. I'm your host, Jim Turner, and today we'll discuss growth tactics with our special guest, who is a subject matter expert in the industry. Let's get started. Hi, my name is Jim Turner, and I'm the CEO of Brokerkit, and I will be your host today. Today on the show, we're excited to have Rob Keefe from Relitix, a real estate data analytics product that we integrate with here at Brokerkit, and a leader in the space around data analytics and the real estate industry to discuss his experience with the industry. So Rob, welcome to the Broker Growth Accelerator.
Thanks, Jim. It's great to be on with you.
All right. Okay, maybe let's just start out with some questions around background. Like, how did you get started in the business, and how did you, progress from, kind of that initial start to the point where you're kind of helping other brokers, with data products around how to accelerate their growth, in their brokerages?
Yeah, I had a pretty weird path getting into real estate, although I think most people had a weird path getting into real estate. Not a lot of people start out planning to be real estate agents. I was in the military as a naval officer for 10 years, was pretty heavy duty into engineering and underwater robotics. Graduate school at MIT, where it was in Navy diver and special operations. And after 10 years doing that, I basically was recruited sort of a bit arm twisted to come back and help in my family's real estate and development business here in southeastern Wisconsin. Our company had been around since 1943, so it's the third generation. Came back, worked in the business for a while, eventually ran that brokerage, and oversaw our title operation, our mortgage operation, and a lot of other sort of ancillary services. Was our state realtor chairman for a year. And then after that, went and ran a relocation management company in Milwaukee for 4 or 5 years. And from the sort of analytic seeds that come along with learning how to manage brokers at scale, which is really what relocation management is, came the idea for starting our company, which I started in late 2016.
Okay, great. So Rob, thanks for kind of the bit on your background. Really excited to hear about some of the insights that you can bring to help our listeners out there, the brokers that want to grow their business. And the focus on this podcast is really going to be around how brokers can grow their business by focusing on the talent funnel. All businesses and really, brokerages specifically need to focus on two primary funnels, the sales funnel and the talent funnel. Most brokerages are super focused on that sales funnel because they came up through sales and that's what they know. But to scale a business, it's all about kind of building, a team below you that's effective and can produce. And so let's kind of start at the top of this funnel, so to speak. And really interested in the insights you can bring around, let's just start with top of the funnel. Like, what is the ideal agent that brokerages should be looking for? And I know that kind of depends in many cases on the brokerage model, their compensation model, their branding, their unique value proposition. Are they looking for new or experienced agents? But, working with your clients in general, what are they looking for? And then as we go along, we are in a bit of a transitional period in the market. What are specific things right now that are super important that they should be looking for? So let's define that ideal agent that they should be looking. What are the characteristics about them? Then we can talk about how to find them, kind of land them, and retain them.
Sure, it's a great question. And what I've told our clients along the way here is there is no ideal agent, but what people should be doing is recruiting to try to create an agent pool with intention. And that, just like any sports team needs a balance of players, a balance of skill sets. If you came on a football field with all 300-pound guys, you wouldn't win. And if you were all, little quarterbacks, you wouldn't win either. You need some big guys and you need some fast guys and people with good arms. Just like that, with that same thought in mind, a brokerage needs a good balance of players. You need, let's talk about the veterans. people that have been in the business, let's say 8, 9, 10 years, have a steady base of business, nice referral business coming in. These are people that are going to add a ton of stability to the brokerage. They're going to be very reliable, and in most cases, ideally, somewhat lower maintenance. We all know exceptions to this particular rule. But these are people that are going to basically provide that base of business and support and respectability. On the other end of the spectrum, you've got the newer agents. Now, newer agents need a lot of care and feeding, and you're not sure who's good and who's bad. Early on in the process, who's going to make it and who isn't. Although together we have some tools that can help with that. But these agents, if they stay, they're guaranteed to grow like 100% a year. Whereas those veteran agents, on their best years, they might do 15, 20%. So if you're trying to get a nice balance between growth and stability, you've got to sort of have an idealized distribution of agents within your brokerage identified. What percentage of your brokerage do you want to have as new agents? What percentage of veteran agents? How about the folks in the middle that have a sort of a balance between growth and stability? But don't forget, those people in their mid-career, like 3-4 years in, those are highly recruitable agents, and they're going to be your biggest flight risk. So you're going to have to pay a lot of attention. So just to bring it down back to the question you asked, I think it depends on the brokerage's strategy. It depends on where they are in their life cycle and where they see themselves in the competitive environment that they find themselves in. But the broker should go in with an idea about what that right balance between growth and stability looks like. How much, what energy he wants to have in the office, how much time he has to spend on mentoring, how much time he or she has to spend on retention. Call it the sort of care and feeding of these agents that need to feel loved on and supported. And with that in mind, identify the gap. So if you have too many new agents, not enough veteran agents, that pushes you in one direction for that ideal agent you're referring to. If you've got all veterans and hardly any new blood, then that's the direction you want to move, and then you need to shift and look for an entirely new kind of agent. Whatever that answer is depends on the strategy for the brokerage, where they are in their life cycle, and what their vision is over the next 2 to 3 years and how they want to grow their business.
Maybe let's just start with the scenario of they don't really have the infrastructure to handle kind of the coaching and training of a lot of new agents. They're looking for maybe more experienced agents. How should they go about finding them? Like, what's the best way to find those people that might be kind of the best fit for them?
All right, so your question implies that we're not recruiting newer people onto teams to support existing agent teams. That'd be another direction to grow that experienced agent piece by making the existing ones more leveraging their capabilities. But if we're just looking to find more experienced folks, need to have a good understanding of sort of where the individual candidates are in their career. Are they approaching the end of their career? Are they starting to, is their production starting to decline? Are they still in a ramp-up phase? Are they a specialist in a specific area? Let's just pull back a little bit and talk about what's going on in the market right now. This is being recorded in February of 2023. We're looking at, 20-30% declines, 40% in some market decline in transaction volume year over year. We've seen sort of this movie play out before, about 13 years ago. Those of us that were either lucky or unlucky enough to have been in real estate in 2008, 2009, sort of saw how this played out with the agent pool back then. And what happened is the agents that had solid bases of business and had a professionalized operation internally, they tended to stay, and a lot of the other agents left the business. I think most people that are observers of the market and sort of see what's going on are predicting that we're going to see potentially 20-25% decline in the number of active agents here within a year or so. especially when dues come up for renewal, license renewals start cycling. And the folks that are going to survive that sort of cut are going to be the people that have a listing-oriented business. By and large, listings are a lot harder to get than getting a buyer lead and running into a buyer. So let's just take a look at that as maybe a top-level filter on the types of people you're looking for. Do they have a listing-oriented business model? Have they proven that they can generate listings and close them? Or are we seeing people that are deriving business from purchased leads or the friends and family circle of buyers that come and go? So that would be the first step. There's obviously a skill component there too. And to the extent that we have the tools to identify who can service listings better than their peers, that's going to give an indication on who might be able to survive this cut as well.
Okay. And obviously, right, brokerages have fixed overhead that they need to cover. And that's not going away, even though the transactions are going down, right? So they are incentivized to go find agents, if they have agents that kind of wash out, to bring those transactions, but they need to be super cognizant of the agents that are most likely to produce and stick around, right? And so, I mean, it sounds like those are some of the characteristics, right? But it's, overall, I mean, I kind of took this down, let's look for experienced agents, but so that's kind of like experienced agents you're looking for in their profile that are most likely to, kind of stay within the business, succeed. What about new agents? Like what can you do, right? Because you do need that balance. It's hard to only focus on experienced agents. You obviously want to find people that are going to weather the storm, but you need that mix, right? That balance. So let's kind of shift to new agents. What are the characteristics you need to be looking for new agents, even though they don't have necessarily that sales history to look at? What should you be looking for in them to be indicators of people that are likely to succeed and stick around and be around, once the market kind of comes back, so to speak?
Yeah, well, and just to frame my answer on this, when I talk about newer agents, I'm not talking about brand new agents out of real estate school. I'm talking about people that in our business we define a newer agent as 3 years or less, because it's usually sort of their ramp up period. So we built a deep learning metric around this that scores the likelihood of newer agents to be successful in business. And some of the things that seem to influence that grade, maybe this is the best way to answer it, sort of the things that are correlated with success in newer agents is, again, their demonstrated ability not just to close buyers, but to actually go out and generate listings. In fact, that might be the single greatest indicator. Has this person actually gone out, been interviewed by someone that's not their relative, and been hired to sell their house, and did they successfully sell it? And if they can show a track record of being able to do that early in their career, that's somebody that has the ability to be successful in real estate, and very clearly demonstrated ability. Obviously, reps. How many times they've had a closing, closed sides, and it doesn't matter whether they're teaming up with somebody, so they're splitting a deal, or if they've got these sides themselves. Just seeing agents that have a proven ability to generate transaction volume, that alone is a great indicator. And maybe that's so basic that it almost goes without saying that agents that sell more have a higher potential. But the only spin I would put on it is put a big heavy bias on list sides.
Right. And so one of the other metrics I know that you've built in your business is the switch risk, right? Using your machine learning models. I get a lot of questions. What does that mean, and how is it measured? I mean, and right, we have to keep in mind our listener may not have these specific products to do this, but the concepts still matter, right? And the correlations matter. So I think it's helpful for people to see what are things that correlate to a likelihood to switch. Maybe just explain what that switch risk is, right? Keeping in mind, we're not trying to sell your product. We're trying to explain what it's doing because people can be looking for these things on the daily basis as they interact with people and they do interviews, right? And there's a way to automate it if they want, but like there's still important factors for people to be considering, even in one-on-one conversations, as they're talking to people, interviewing them, and whatnot.
Sure. The insight here is that if you look at an agent's pattern of behavior in the market, their listings, sales, expirations, active listing count, and so on, you can infer certain things from that pattern of behavior about what they're likely to do in the future. And for the experienced brokers watching this call, I mean, if you had an agent that's consistently listing 2 or 3 homes a month and is carrying 10 listings, and all of a sudden they stop listing and they start expiring their business out, that's pretty obvious tell that there's something going on. So the model that you alluded to is just our way of operationalizing that through a little bit of AI. But some of the things that would suggest an agent that might be a flight risk to their current broker would be, well, as I just mentioned, someone that looks like they're artificially driving down their active listing count and deferring listings. I mean, I guess that goes without saying, but these, if an agent leaves you as a broker, they really don't want to be dealing with active listings, or they want to minimize the amount of that because they know that you're going to extract, or they may be concerned you're going to extract a little bit of pound of flesh from them on the way out. Other things that we've noticed that correlate with departures like that are newer agents that go from nothing to something very quickly. In other words, people that are showing very rapid growth, I don't think it's because they're starting to look. I think it's because they're starting to get called. So remember, correlation and causation are not the same thing. Just because someone's pattern of behavior is a certain way doesn't mean they're engineering it. But people, in this case, that are popping up onto all the other brokers' radar screens are likely to get recruited because they're getting all these fantastic offers. So what's the takeaway for that? If you have a newer agent that, and let's just assume for the sake of this example, you're a progressive split broker, and you've got a newer agent that sort of popped out of the woodwork and is just killing it, maybe we bump him up a couple tiers on the commission scale early and show them a little bit of love like that, because this person is going to be getting those calls. We know how valuable a high growth agent can be, and other sort of savvy recruiters at other brokerages know this as well. So it's I think we've been able to show that you can actually take those patterns of behavior and correlate them with actual movement of agents in the market. So just pay very close attention, certainly to those two examples of agents, both within your brokerage and then also looking outside at people you might be interested in recruiting.
Sure. Well, and let's take the flip side, right? So you see those, you find the agents that seem super promising, right? Because they're kind of killing it and they're new in the business and they're in another brokerage. How do you, you kind of talked about how if they're your agents, how to retain them. If you want to try to, bring them over to, your company, how should they be reaching out, and what should they be saying as a way to entice them to make a switch?
Well, we've had, and just going back to my broker experience here, I think it's a matter of putting yourself in their shoes and just imagining what they're going through. They're starting a new career. It seems like it's going well. Maybe it's a little easier than they thought, because they're a natural at it. But they're still probably not getting the love in the office, especially from the more experienced agents. In my experience, within our office, there's always a little bit of pushback with the young upstarts. Who do you think you are? I've been the king of the hill here for a long time. So they're probably starting to feel a little bit of that office drama. And maybe they're not totally getting the kind of attention from the managers that they feel they might deserve. So I guess the approach there would be just to roll out the red carpet. Say, look, we've been watching you very closely. You're one of the future rock stars, and we're going to treat you that way when you come over. And here's how we're going to, and then lay it out and be prepared to make them an offer they can't refuse. Because these high growth agents, as I mentioned earlier, will fuel a business, and they're very valuable. They'll also act as bell cows for other like-minded agents at similar points in their career, and it can basically form the nucleus of another little sort of pot of growth within your brokerage. That would be the way I would look at it, but I think you might even you'd be a better person than I would to lay out that particular recruiting pitch. Probably involve some drip campaigns with the CRM.
Yes, that's a great way to do it. That's what we would recommend. And we happen to have one, but there's many others that you could leverage too. I guess one question is, right, like this is kind of like stats you're talking about of production once they're producing. Especially people, and you kind of characterize agents as 1 to 3 years, right? And, there's people kind of, we have many customers that are talking to people really that are switching industries or, in real estate schools, right? So how do you believe that there's, or what do you think the best way to try to sense these techniques in interviews and talking to the people that really don't have that production yet? And do you have, there's, I don't know that I've asked you this before, but, there's analytics of, around personality assessments and things like that. Have you had any customers that have tied, personality assessments, whether it's DISC or, some other tool like a predictive index of who's likely to then produce later? Has anybody kind of done that? Because I know people are using tools like that. Do you have any kind of unique perspective on how that could, tools like that could be used to predict what people might be doing when they're producing later, I guess, if that makes sense?
We worked with a client who implemented predictive index across a multi-hundred regional brokerage, or multi-hundred agent regional brokerage. Predictive index is a 5-part personality assessment. It has different personality traits like extroversion and pace and rule follower versus rule breaker and those kind of things. But it produces a numerical output that we were then able to analyze against their performance, their in-market performance. And what I expected to see when I came in there is that we would find the best people would look like the prototypical salesperson, high autonomy, high extroversion, multitasker, kind of loose with the rules, but, do what it takes kind of person. And that profile did actually correlate, to nobody's surprise, with some higher production. But I guess the headline here is that just about every sort of profile that we came across had examples of successful agents in it. And there was another profile that actually was quite highly correlated with success, which was a introverted, highly systematized agent. And I suppose if you sit and think about it a little bit, if you have somebody that's going to have a system and follow the system, be exceptionally good at following up, exceptionally good at drip campaigns, at working their sphere of influence, at following through on calls and returned emails and so on, maybe isn't like the life of the party and isn't the big personality that's on $1 Million Agent, but is just a solid operator. That's also a recipe for success, and makes sense to me now that I've thought about it. But that was sort of an insight that we derived from looking at this large data set of personality profiles.
Right. Well, and as many people have heard the saying, the fortune's in the follow-up, and not everybody's wired to keep managing the follow-up, right? So people that are, right, a lot of times you have an initial conversation. It's great, but it's not the right time, right? And you need to kind of stay in touch because maybe it is 3 months later, and that's how you kind of build the brand and get to know everybody in your market, right? But it takes patience, right? And kind of structure around a system. And I would argue it requires kind of building systematizing your talent funnel, like many brokers systematize their sales funnel essentially, and thinking of it that way, right? And putting a pipeline around it and funnel and campaigns and task management and just following up with people is just a huge part of closing. Whether it's buyers or sellers, homes, or kind of agents in your marketplace, especially very successful ones. So
for sure. But I would say with the brand new folks, there's so many different paths to success in real estate that the ROI from investing a lot of money in early personality profiling of real estate school graduates and so on might be lower than one would suspect. Just because it's really hard to tell. It's extremely hard to tell who's going to take to this business ahead of time. Right. Early on in our business, my idea out the gate was that we were gonna do some of this personality modeling and correlate it with success in real estate. And I was going to have this great tool that would allow the brokers to identify great people in the wild, non-real estate people that would become great agents. And when I talked to a few of the large brokers about it, they said, "I love the idea, but frankly, Rob, we're just going to hire everybody anyways."
Right.
So I'm like, right. Well,
right. Well, and then of course, you have the benefit of being able to pull production stats, which doesn't exist in any other industry, right? And if you can, why not leverage it, right? Because that's much more predictive, right, than their personality traits. And to me, the reason is because you can't tell people's inherent motivations, right? What leads to success is their aptitude, their experience, but also their motivations, right? And that's the thing that's really hard to tell. And that's why what I've noticed that certain people seem great, right? Don't work out. Other people, you're surprised that they crush it, right? It's hard to really tell people's inherent motivations and drives. And none of these assessments really tell that. But I guess, through time, their production stats show it. That's the one thing that really does show that, right? Because if they're not out hustling, the production will show it.
And I think the future of applying data science to our business provides a path for very early detection on who's going to make it. I don't think we need to give them 2 years. I think within a year and a half, we'll kind of know.
Right. Yeah, and anything that gives you the edge, right? Because recruiting agents and then coaching them is a high calorie burn activity, right? So you want to place your chips on the people most likely to succeed, right? That's going to accelerate your growth by, choosing the best people to kind of work with. So anything that gives you that edge, use it. But I think it's interesting to note, and I know I kind of threw the curveball at you about personality assessments, but I figured you would probably know, being an analytical guy, have an opinion on that. So, and that kind of aligns with what I've seen and heard in the past too. So we talked about kind of finding those agents, landing them. Let's talk about retaining them, right? So data is a big part of, retaining agents, right? Because it's part of coaching, right? Because you have production, right, that you're coaching them on. At the end of the day, people, when I talk to kind of brokers out there and ask them what leads to retention, it's typically, they have to produce, first of all, but it's like coaching and keeping them engaged. What are the practices that you feel the leading brokers are doing out there in coaching their agents and keeping them engaged? And how does data factor in? What's the data that they can use as part of those conversations to keep people, kind of motivated and producing and engaged so that they stick around?
Well, start by looking at a macro trend that's been happening over the last 10 years, which is the ratio of sales managers to agents keeps growing. In other words, an individual sales manager is managing a larger and larger pool of agents. And with some business models, you could effectively say there's very little sales management, or the sales management is extremely sort of episodic. You can send a contract for review for someone in a different state to review it for you. So that's the challenge for brokers. How do you, in an environment where an agent's getting a smaller and smaller piece of management time, how do you keep them engaged and stay in touch with them? And I think that is where the data comes in, because to the extent that you can identify in the data which agents have something going on with them, you can then focus management attention where it's needed. An example of that would be an agent who is chugging along and very reliably doing $6-7 million a year, and all of a sudden they go without a closing for a month, or maybe they're just closing at half their normal rate for 2 months, or something like that happens. There's a major disruption, and if it was a 1 to 10 ratio of managers to agents, the manager would already be in the loop as far as what's happening and be able to say, is there something going on in your life that we can help you with? Can we backfill you? Do you need a little bit more attention or more help with some of the admin side? We do a few mailings for you and so on. If the manager's managing 100 agents and they're mostly remote, they may not catch it very quickly. On the data side, what we try to do is provide queuing for management intervention based on what's going on based on things that are disruptive one way or another. So I'd mentioned it's sort of a bad outcome, like someone's having their business is falling off or something. There's a major disruption in there, but equally important is the pat on the back for someone that is having a great couple months or just knocks a closing out of the park, a really hard to sell property, and they just happen to find the right buyer, and they sort of bring this sort of complicated deal over the finish line. Those pats on the back from the broker owner count for a tremendous amount, and staying engaged with agents like that is, I think, to a large degree, a matter of staying very closely aligned with what their business is from a day-to-day perspective.
Sure. And so how do you know when you made a great hire? Is it after 30 days, 90 days, 6 months? And what do you think that you need to see that tells you this person was a great hire?
Well, in terms of business disruption, I think you can count on a 3-month period of time where their business is going to be kind of screwed up as they retool with the new brand. I know there's things you can do to sort of short circuit that process, but any move is going to involve a little bit of disruption as people get their new marketing materials on the street, learn where the coffee maker is, learn who to talk to about getting their commission check and all that other stuff. But I would say within a 3 to 4 month period of time, are they back to performing at the level that they were before you brought them over? Are they getting along with the staff? I think to say, are they getting along with their fellow agents? That might be a bit of a big ask, because these are, in some cases, big personalities, and a little bit of friction is sort of built into the industry. But the support staff, are they taking advantage of the services that are being offered? Do they talk to the manager? Are they engaged, or are they just a presence on the roster that you very rarely see in the office?
Okay. Now let's just talk about, more generally, how brokers can be strategic and most effectively scale their organization. What are the top levers? Like when you're dealing with a lot of the top brokers out there as clients, what do you think sets them apart? What are they doing, not related to the sales funnel, the talent funnel, and, having kind of an unfair advantage, so to speak, on how they manage talent as a way to have growth, that's above market, essentially. What are those top factors that you see them doing that sets them apart?
So, you're making me think of some of the larger brokers we deal with, some of the larger ones in the U.S. One of their sort of hidden secret weapons is the fact that they do have professional recruiters. They're not multitasking office managers to recruit. And generally, the office managers will have a role, an identification role, or maybe a sort of a bird dogging role in it. But there are people that, and maybe it's at a regional level, and maybe it's at a corporate level, who carry a quota and who have their scripting very well refined and can take advantage of the hyper targeting tools that are out there in terms of data and CRM support and so on. Those folks are very effective in it because they're full-time pros at recruiting agents. Now, there are some businesses that distribute that responsibility to the office managers that are and still have success at it. But in every case, those office managers carry a quota themselves and have a lot of follow-up. In other words, it's not a fire and forget kind of situation where you got your Lake Geneva manager and you're asking them to recruit 3 people this month, and you check in. It's February 1st. You check in on March 1st. How'd you do? It's a weekly call. Hey, this is our Thursday afternoon recruiting call. Who'd you call? Who'd you get a hold of? Do you need more names? How do we how do we get some more activity? And it becomes a core function of the office. Of course, that takes away from other things, but life's a series of trade-offs. And to summarize in this one, it would be people that prioritize agent recruitment as a core corporate function and a core element of their success, not as sort of an accidental thing or something they do when they realize they're getting a little low on agent count.
Right. Yeah, no, 100%. And I would say the larger brokerages tend to know the financials better, and they know what an agent's worth, and they're willing to invest, right? And in some ways, they're larger, right? They have more transactions, so easier to cover the overhead. But I think, one of what I've seen is the high growth comes from brokers that really know the financials of, and the unit economics of how much does it cost to hire an agent? What are they worth to my business, right? And they're predictable. They've got it down where they know how to recruit someone. They know how long it's going to take on average, how many they can bring in per month. And, they know what it's going to cost them. They know on average, what's my attrition rate or my retention rate? And then what are they going to produce on average? Therefore, what are they worth, right? And that ratio of what it costs to acquire an agent versus what are they worth, the people that know that understand that, and they're the ones that invest in the infrastructure because they know it's going to be a high ROI. And that's what I see. It's kind of a different way of saying what you said, right? But a lot of them use EOS and have a scorecard around these metrics, right? That's pretty popular out there. But they're looking weekly for whether it's they're hiring a recruiter or whether the sales managers own this responsibilities, they're giving them targets. Their compensation is tied to this. They have weekly targets for appointments, calls, or maybe monthly around hires, right? And they're, it's not just, as you said, set and forget. They're not just leaving them out there to kind of do it, right? They're giving them, there's somebody responsible for coaching them, right? And there's some kind of scorecard around that. And this can be done in spreadsheets. Within our tool, we built some automation around how to do that because we think it's really important. And we have our own scorecard that we manage that we think is super important too, because it works for sure. So, yeah,
just like any other outside sales function, if you think of the managers as individual salespeople, they need to have their own funnel, and that funnel needs to be tracked. How many people are at the top? And what are the stages? We've even seen companies that have developed full sort of sales funnel and analogs for recruiting. Did they take a call? Did they stop by, have a lunch, or stop by the office? It's the next step down in the funnel. Did you write them a proposal? And to track conversion rates within the funnel, just like any other professional sales organization.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and back to kind of the concept of the talent funnel. The people that are serious, they have a good sources of leads, right? And a good way to track all these. So they know their conversion rates, and they are making sure whether it's a recruiter or a sales manager who owns that recruiting, they're giving them, here's your territory, here's your leads to prospect into. They're asking them to hit certain activity targets, whether they be, appointments or calls, and they're asking them, they're tracking their conversion rate around, how many leads did you get? How many did you end up having a conversation with? How many did you set an appointment with? And then how many did you hire, basically, and tracking that just like you would on the sales side with buyers and sellers. And when you track that, right, you're going to see everybody gets blocked in different places. Certain people, right, and you can give variable coaching based on where they need the most help. Are they setting appointments, but they're not maybe closing them? Do they need a bigger territory to farm? Are they just, they just need to, they're sending a bunch of emails, but they just need to pick up the phone and call people. They need to get out to some events. They need to leverage social media more, right? So, yeah, totally agree. That's what we've seen too. Well, great. I mean, any other tips, any other big things that you've seen out there that our listeners need to be considering as a way to kind of, ramp up their growth and honestly in 2023 shift, manage their talent funnel in such a way that they are most likely to bring people on board that are really going to kind of weather the storm, and they're going to be poised to kind of crush it once the market kind of turns around a little bit.
Sure. Just a couple parting thoughts. One, just to dovetail off what you're saying about the managing the funnel. I mean, our industry is one as a culture of sort of letting individual contributors do their thing. That we don't, as brokerage managers, we don't like to, in most cases, we're not getting in our agents' business about how many calls they're making or what are you doing on Tuesday afternoon? How many calls do you do this week? We're sort of like a let them do their thing sort of culture in general when it comes to agents. The problem is you can't really run a recruiting operation that way. A recruiting operation has to be run like someone would run, as I mentioned earlier, an outside sales organization with quota-carrying individuals and frequent follow-up and very careful tracking through a funnel. So it's a cultural shift that successful broker leaders have to make to effectively manage a good recruiting program. You got to shift your mindset from they're doing their thing, they're generating sales, and I don't want to get in their business too much, to I need to be all over these people and find out how many calls they're making. And it's a little uncomfortable transition, but it's the people that do it well have made it. And I guess my last thought for today on this is that we're entering a sort of almost like a golden age of recruiting here for the next, I think, probably 6 to 9 months. There's a tremendous amount of dislocation in the industry. Agents that were firmly cemented to their broker last year are not anymore in many cases. These agents are having bad years. They tend to, when that happens, they tend to blame it on their broker first, or at least many of them do. And they're open to conversation. People are open to conversations now that weren't open to conversations a year or two ago. There's going to be a lot of people, as I mentioned earlier, that end up leaving the business. So whenever you have this much dislocation within the agent pool, there's huge opportunity in the recruiting side. And I think success is going to go to the people that use the best tools, the best data, and have the best sort of systematized and consistent approach and execution.
Well said. And I totally agree, 100% there, Rob. I think that covers all the questions that I have for you today. Where can our listeners find you online if they'd like to learn more about what you guys do?
Yeah, we're at relitix.com, RELITIX, and they can reach me at rob@relitix.com.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Rob, for joining us today, and thanks to our listeners for tuning in to this episode. Please tune in to future episodes so you can kind of learn more nuggets that you can put to work in your business. But I'd like you to kind of think about these things Rob said. Make a mental note of a few things that are actionable and put them to work over the next month. And good luck growing your brokerage. If you enjoyed our show, please add a rating for us on Apple or Spotify podcasts. And be sure to come back next time to hear more strategies that will help you grow your business. Until then, this is Jim Turner. And don't forget, you need to put some of these tips to work today.
Thanks for listening to the Broker Growth Accelerator podcast by Brokerkit. This episode was produced by Jared White from InPhase Media and created and hosted by Jim Turner from Brokerkit.